After helping my company win a contract worth $200 million, my boss fired me saying I was more popular than him in public. So I sued him and demanded damages of about $3 million. What happened next was shocking. Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Deborah Carson from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into the details of today's story. I stood at the head of the conference table, my palms sweating despite the air conditioning humming in the background. The room smelled of coffee and ambition, the kind of scent that clung to Zenith Solutions like a second skin. My team flanked me, their faces tight with anticipation, and across the table sat the government officials, stone-faced, their eyes flicking between me and the stack of documents I'd spent months preparing. This was it, the $200 million contract, the biggest in Zenith's history. My pitch had been flawless, every slide rehearsed, every question anticipated. When the lead official leaned forward and said, "We're impressed, Mr. Harper. You've got the deal," the room erupted in applause. My chest swelled, not just with pride but with relief. I'd done it. I'd delivered. That night, the headlines poured in. Zenith Solutions lands historic contract. One read, "Edward Harper, the future of tech," another declared. I remember staring at my phone, the blue light burning my eyes as I scrolled through article after article. My name, my face, splashed across the internet like I was some kind of celebrity. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. But it was mine, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe I belonged at the top. Victor Langston, my boss and Zenith CEO, clapped me on the back during the next board meeting. "Edward, you're a star," he said, his smile wide and dazzling, the kind that made clients sign contracts without reading the fine print. But there was something off in his eyes, a flicker I couldn't place. I brushed it aside, chalking it up to the stress of running a company. Victor had always been charming, a little larger than life, and I'd spent years proving my loyalty to him. I'd worked late nights, missed my sister's graduation, skipped holidays, all for Zenith, all for him. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. The cracks started small. Victor began excluding me from key meetings, claiming they were executive only. He'd take credit for my ideas and interviews, saying, "We came up with this strategy," when I'd spent weeks crunching numbers alone. Whispers started circulating, rumors that I was too ambitious, that I was planning to leave and start my own company. I laughed them off at first, thinking they were just office gossip. But then I noticed the way people looked at me in the halls, their eyes darting away like I was a liability. I tried confronting Victor, but he'd wave me off with that same dazzling smile. "Edward, you're overthinking it. You're indispensable." Indispensable. That word echoed in my mind the night of the celebratory gala, a black tie affair in Zenith's ballroom. The chandeliers glittered like stars, and the air buzzed with champagne-fueled laughter. I was mingling with clients, shaking hands, when Victor took the stage. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. He raised his glass, his voice booming through the microphone. "Tonight, we celebrate Zenith's greatest achievement," he began, and I felt a flicker of pride. But then his tone shifted, sharp and cold. "And tonight, we part ways with Edward Harper." The room gasped. My heart plummeted, like I'd been shoved off a cliff. Victor continued, his words slicing through me like knives. "Edward's contributions have been notable, but his ambition has crossed a line. He's become disloyal, more interested in fame than in Zenith's success. Effective immediately, he's no longer part of this company." The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, frozen, my tuxedo suddenly too tight, the champagne flute trembling in my hand. Faces turned toward me, some shocked, others smug, but all of them judging. Victor stepped down from the stage, his eyes meeting mine for a split second. There was no remorse, only triumph, like he'd just won a game I didn't know I was playing. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I turned and walked out, the ballroom doors slamming shut behind me. The drive home was a blur, the city lights streaking past like comets. I replayed Victor's words, each one a fresh wound. Disloyal, ambitious, Fame-hungry. Lies. All of them. But they'd stuck, burrowing into the minds of everyone in that room. By morning, the headlines had shifted. Edward Harper fired amid controversy. One read, Zenith CEO alleges disloyalty. Another screamed. My phone buzzed with notifications, but I couldn't bring myself to look. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photo on my nightstand. Me and Jamie, my younger sibling, at their high school talent show. I'd missed it, working late for Zenith. I'd missed so much, and for what? To be discarded like trash? Anger bubbled up, hot and fierce. Victor had taken everything. My job, my reputation, my sense of self. But I wasn't going to let him win. I picked up my phone and dialed Maya Chun, a lawyer I'd met at a networking event. Her voice was crisp, no nonsense, when she answered. Edward, what's wrong? I took a deep breath, the words spilling out like venom. Victor fired me. Publicly. Humiliated me. I want to sue him, Maya. I want justice. She listened, her silence steady, and when I finished, she said, This won't be easy, Edward. But if you're willing to fight, I'll fight with you. I hung up, staring at the city skyline through my window. The lights glittered, cold and distant, but they felt like a challenge. Victor thought he'd broken me. He thought he'd won. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The first time I met Maya Chun in person, she'd leaned across her cluttered desk, her dark eyes sharp as a hawk's, and said, This isn't just a lawsuit, Edward. It's war. I'd nodded, my jaw tight, still reeling from Victor's betrayal. Her office smelled of old books and strong coffee, a stark contrast to Zenith's sleek glass and steel headquarters. Papers were stacked in haphazard towers, but Maya moved through the chaos with precision, pulling out a legal pad and scribbling notes as I recounted the gala. Wrongful termination, she muttered, tapping her pen. Defamation, too. We've got a case, but it's going to get ugly. You ready for that? I was. Or at least, I thought I was. The weeks that followed blurred into a storm of depositions and sleepless nights. I'd sit in my apartment, the city humming outside, and replay every moment I'd spent at Zenith. The memories came unbidden, late nights hunched over spreadsheets, Victor's hand on my shoulder as he'd said, You're my right hand, Edward. I'd believed him. Back then, I'd been fresh out of college, a kid from a working-class neighborhood with a knack for numbers and a hunger to prove myself. Zenith had been my ladder, and Victor my guide. I'd built their analytics division from scratch, turned a floundering startup into a contender. And now? Now I was the enemy. Maya dug up evidence like a bloodhound on a scent. Emails where Victor praised my work, then contradicted himself in private memos. Security footage from the gala showing him smirking as I walked out. She even tracked down a former colleague, Sarah Klein, who'd quit Zenith after Victor screamed at her for questioning his decisions. He's got a pattern, Maya said, sliding a folder across her desk. You're not the first he's burned. Sarah's testimony would be gold, but I hated dragging her into this. She'd been a friend, one of the few who'd texted me after the firing. I'm so sorry, Ed. You didn't deserve that. The trial loomed like a thunderhead on the horizon. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, dreaming of Victor's voice booming through that ballroom. My phone stayed silent. No calls from old coworkers, no offers from recruiters. The headlines had branded me a pariah, and Victor's whispers had spread like wildfire. Disloyal, they'd called me. A fame chaser. I'd stare at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, my eyes bloodshot, and wonder if I'd misjudged everything. Maybe I had been too ambitious. Maybe I'd pushed too hard. But then I'd remember Victor's smug grin, and the doubt would harden into resolve. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, all polished wood and stale air. I sat beside Maya, my tie strangling me, as Victor strode in with his legal team, a pack of suits with shark smiles. He wouldn't look at me, his gaze fixed on the judge like I didn't exist. The gallery was packed, reporters, ex-colleagues, even a few clients I'd wooed for Zenith. Their stares burned into me, but I kept my head up. Maya squeezed my arm. Chin up, Edward. We've got this. Victor's lawyers went first, painting me as an opportunist who'd ridden Zenith's coattails to fame. Mr. Harper sought personal glory over company loyalty, their lead counsel drawled, flashing a photo of me from a magazine cover. He planned to abandon Zenith the moment he got the spotlight. My stomach twisted. That photo, me in a crisp suit, smiling after the contract win, had been a proud moment. Now it was a weapon. The gallery murmured, and I gripped the table, my knuckles white. When it was our turn, Maya stood, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. Edward Harper didn't seek fame. He earned it. And Victor Langston couldn't handle that. She laid out the evidence, emails, footage, timelines, showing how Victor had orchestrated my firing to protect his ego. Then she called me to the stand. I walked up, my legs shaky, and swore the oath. The room blurred, but Maya's steady gaze anchored me. "Tell us about the contract," she said. I took a breath and let it spill out. Months of sleepless nights, the team I'd rallied, the pride I'd felt when we won. "I did it for Zenith," I said, my voice cracking. "For Victor. He was like a mentor to me. I never wanted his job. I just wanted to do mine." The words hung there, raw and honest, and I saw a juror nod, her eyes softening. Victor's cross-examination was brutal. His lawyer leaned in, sneering. "You enjoyed the attention, didn't you? The headlines, the praise." I clenched my fists. "I enjoyed the work," I shot back. "The praise was a bonus. Victor's the one who cared about headlines." A ripple of laughter broke the tension, and the lawyer faltered. I glanced at Victor then, and for the first time, he met my eyes. There was no charm there, just cold fury. Sarah's testimony sealed it. She took the stand, her voice trembling but firm, and described Victor's temper as paranoia. He hated anyone who outshone him, she said. Edward was the best of us, and Victor couldn't stand it. The jury shifted, their faces hardening as they looked at Victor. I wanted to hug Sarah, but all I could do was nod, my throat tight. The verdict came fast. In favor of the plaintiff, the judge intoned. $3 million in damages. The gallery erupted, cameras flashing, but I barely heard it. Maya clapped my shoulder, grinning. "You did it, Edward." I should have felt triumphant, but as Victor stormed out, he paused at the door and hissed, "You'll regret this, Harper." His words slithered down my spine, a promise of worse to come. That night, I sat in my apartment, the check in my hands. $3 million. It was a fortune, but it didn't erase the ache. Jamie came over, their lanky frame filling the doorway. "You won, Ed," they said, flopping onto my couch. "Why do you look like you lost?" I stared at the city skyline, the lights mocking me. "Because it's not enough," I said. "Victor took everything, my job, my name. I need to take it back." Jamie frowned, then grinned. "So do it. Start your own company. Show him." I turned to them, the idea sparking like a match in the dark. Apex Innovations. My company, my rules. I grabbed my laptop, adrenaline surging. "You're right," I said. "I'll build something better. Something he can't touch." Jamie laughed, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The first office for Apex Innovations smelled like mildew and ambition. It was a cramped space above a noodle shop, the kind of place where the walls seemed to sweat and the fluorescent lights flickered like they were mocking us. I'd sunk most of the settlement money into it. Rent, equipment, salaries for the handful of loyalists who'd followed me from Zenith. There were 5 of us total, including me, each one a refugee from Victor's ego. We'd sit around a folding table, laptops open, brainstorming ideas while the radiator hissed in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was ours. And every time I looked at their faces, hopeful, determined, I felt the weight of their trust. I couldn't let them down. The early days were brutal. I'd wake up before dawn, my dreams haunted by Victor's sneer, and spend hours cold-calling potential clients. Most hung up before I could finish my pitch. Apex Innovations, they'd say, their voices dripping with skepticism. "Never heard of you." I'd grit my teeth, forcing a smile into my voice. "We're new, but we're innovative. Give us a chance." Silence, then a click. Rejection after rejection, each one a splinter under my skin. I'd stare at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, my eyes hollow, and wonder if Victor had been right. Maybe I was just a fame chaser, chasing a dream I couldn't catch. Victor didn't make it easier. He'd blacklisted me in the industry, whispering to clients and competitors that I was unstable, unreliable. I'd hear it secondhand. Old contacts avoiding my calls, emails unanswered. One client, a tech startup I'd wooed for Zenith, emailed me back after weeks of silence. "Sorry, Edward. Victor says you're trouble. Can't risk it." I slammed my laptop shut, my hands shaking. Trouble. That word clung to me like a shadow, Victor's shadow, and I hated how it made me doubt myself. But doubt was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not with my team counting on me. We worked late into the nights, fueled by cheap coffee and cheaper takeout from the noodle shop downstairs. I'd sketch out ideas for our flagship product, an AI-driven analytics tool, faster and smarter than anything Zenith offered. This is our edge, I'd tell the team, pacing the office. We don't need their name. We need something better. They'd nod, their faces lit by the glow of their screens, but I could see the exhaustion creeping in. We were running on fumes, and the bank account was dwindling. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, calculating how long we had before we'd have to shut down. 6 months, maybe less. The thought made my chest tighten, like I was drowning in my own ambition. Then Victor struck. I got the call from our cybersecurity guy, Malik, at 2 a.m. "Edward, we've been hacked," he said, his voice tight. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. "What do you mean, hacked?" He explained. Someone had tried to leak our proprietary data, the AI algorithms we'd spent months developing. "I caught it in time," Malik said, "but it was close. Too close." I paced my apartment, the city silent outside, and asked the question I dreaded. "Who?" Malik hesitated, then said, "We traced the IP. It leads back to Zenith." To Victor. Rage surged through me, hot and blinding. I wanted to storm into Zenith, drag Victor out by his collar, and make him admit what he'd done. But I knew better. He'd deny it, twist it, make me look paranoid. Instead, I called Maya. "Victor's trying to sabotage us," I said, my voice shaking. She listened, then said, "We'll handle this, Edward. But you need to focus. Apex comes first." She was right. I couldn't let him win, not like this. Malik and I worked through the night, securing our systems, and by morning, we had proof. Emails linking the hacker to Victor. Maya took it to the press, and the headlines shifted. Zenith CEO caught in sabotage scandal. For the first time, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Victor's empire was cracking, and I'd helped expose it. But satisfaction didn't pay the bills. We were still struggling, and the pressure was mounting. I'd catch my team exchanging worried glances, their voices hushed. "Edward's pushing too hard." I overheard one say. "We can't keep up." I wanted to snap, to tell them I was pushing because I had to, because failure wasn't an option. But I didn't. Instead, I called a meeting, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I know it's hard," I said, looking at each of them. "But we're building something real. Something better than Zenith. I believe in us. Do you?" They nodded, their eyes meeting mine, and I saw it. The spark of trust, fragile but alive. It was enough. For now. The turning point came at a tech conference in Chicago. I'd scraped together the last of our funds to attend, hoping to land a client. I stood at our booth, a folding table with a banner Jamie had designed, and pitched to anyone who'd listen. Most walked past, their eyes glazing over, but then a woman stopped. Lila Patel, CEO of a mid-sized logistics firm. "AI analytics, huh?" she said, her gaze sharp. "Show me." I poured everything into that pitch. Months of work, years of frustration, all of it distilled into 15 minutes. When I finished, she leaned back, her lips pursed. "Impressive," she said. "Send me a proposal." I nodded, my throat tight, and as she walked away, I felt it, a crack in the wall, a glimmer of hope. Lila signed on a week later, our first major client. The team cheered when I told them, their faces lit with relief. We celebrated with cheap beer and pizza, the office buzzing with energy. Jamie slung an arm around me, grinning. "You did it, Ed." I shook my head. We did it. And for the first time in months, I believed it. Apex was alive, breathing, and Victor couldn't touch us. Not anymore. But Victor wasn't done. I got the email that night, forwarded from a contact. "Victor's planning something big. Watch your back." I stared at the screen, the words blurring. He was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. I looked at my team, laughing and clinking bottles, and felt the weight of their trust again. I'd built this, against all odds, and I'd protect it. No matter what Victor threw at me next. Winning Lila Patel's contract felt like breaking through a wall I'd been pounding on for months. The office buzzed with energy that day, The kind of energy that made the mildew smell less oppressive, the flickering lights less mocking. We'd done it. Landed our first major client, a foothold in an industry that had slammed its doors in my face. I stood at the head of our folding table, watching my team celebrate. Malik raised a slice of pizza like a trophy, grinning. "To Apex," he shouted, and the others echoed him, their voices bouncing off the walls. Jamie caught my eye, their smile wide and proud, and for a moment, I let myself believe we'd turned a corner. But deep down, I knew better. This was just the beginning, and the climb ahead was steeper than ever. Apex grew fast after that, faster than I'd dared to hope. Lila's company spread the word, and soon, other clients came knocking, startups, mid-sized firms, even a few corporations I'd pitched to at Zenith. Our AI analytics tool was a hit, faster and smarter than anything on the market. I'd walk into the office, still cramped, still above the noodle shop, and find Malik hunched over his laptop, debugging code, while Jamie sketched new features on a whiteboard. We hired more people, bright-eyed grads and industry vets who'd heard about Apex and wanted in. The team expanded, and so did our ambitions. We moved to a bigger office downtown, all glass and steel, a far cry from our humble start. I'd stand at the window, looking out at the city skyline, and feel a flicker of pride. This was mine. Ours. The media noticed, too. Headlines shifted. Apex Innovations, the new Zenith? One read, Edward Harper's comeback story, another declared. I'd scroll through articles on my phone, my chest tight, remembering how those same outlets had branded me a pariah. Now they wanted interviews, photo shoots, the works. I turned most down, wary of the spotlight. Victor had taught me that fame was a double-edged sword, and I wasn't about to let it cut me again. But the attention helped. Clients trusted us, investors called, and Apex's bank account grew. For the first time in months, I slept through the night, my dreams free of Victor's sneer. But growth brought its own challenges. The team was bigger now, and with size came cracks. I'd catch hushed conversations in the break room, worried glances when I walked by. Edward's pushing too hard. I overheard one day, a junior developer named Ryan muttering to Malik, "We're burning out." I wanted to snap, to tell them I was pushing because I had to, because failure wasn't an option. But I didn't. Instead, I called a meeting, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I know it's intense," I said, looking at each of them. "But we're building something real. Something better than Zenith. I need you to trust me." They nodded, their eyes meeting mine, and I saw it. The spark of belief, fragile but alive. It was enough. For now. Then the betrayal came. I got the call from Malik late one night, his voice tight. "Edward, we've got a problem. Ryan's been talking to Victor." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, talking?" Malik explained. Victor had approached Ryan at a bar, offered him a payout to leak Apex's data. Ryan had hesitated, but he'd taken the meeting. "I caught him copying files," Malik said. Confronted him. "He's scared, Edward. Says he's drowning in debt. Can't keep up." I paced my apartment, the city silent outside, rage and hurt warring inside me. Ryan had been one of our first hires, a kid with potential. I'd mentored him, trusted him. And now this. I called Ryan in the next morning, my office door closed. He sat across from me, his hands trembling, eyes red-rimmed. "I didn't send anything," he blurted. "I swear, Edward. I needed the money." Victor said. I cut him off, my voice low. "Victor's poison, Ryan. You knew that." He nodded, tears spilling over. "I'm sorry. I messed up. I wanted to fire him on the spot, to scream that trust was everything, that he'd jeopardized us all. But I saw the kid sitting there, broken and desperate, and something shifted. "You're out," I said, my tone firm. "But I'll help you find help. Therapy, debt counseling. You're not alone." He stared at me, stunned, then nodded. "Thank you," he whispered. As he left, I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion washing over me. Leadership wasn't just about winning. It was about compassion, too, even when it hurt. Victor's empire was crumbling by then. Zenith lost clients to Apex, their stock plummeting like a stone. I'd hear rumors. Victor screaming at board meetings, firing loyalists, blaming everyone but himself. The headlines turned brutal. "Zenith Solutions on the brink," one read. Victor Langston's fall from grace, another declared. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was a hollow ache. Zenith had been my home once, my dream. Watching it die hurt, even after everything Victor had done. But I couldn't dwell on it. Apex needed me, and I needed Apex. The pressure mounted. We landed a massive contract, bigger than Lila's, but it stretched us thin. I risked my personal savings to cover payroll, my bank account dwindling. Jamie noticed, their brow furrowed. Ed, you're killing yourself, they said one night, flopping onto my couch. You can't carry this alone. I sighed, staring at the city lights. I have to, Jamie. They're counting on me. They shook their head, grinning. We're counting on each other. Let us help. I looked at them, their words sinking in, and felt a weight lift. They were right. Apex wasn't just mine, it was ours. The next day, I delegated more, trusted more, and the team rallied. Malik took on tech leadership, Jamie spearheaded marketing, and I focused on strategy. We were stronger together, and it showed. Then the news broke. Zenith Solutions filed for bankruptcy. I sat at my desk, staring at the headline, my chest tight. The company that had discarded me, humiliated me, was gone. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was resolve. I called Maya, my voice steady. Zenith's for sale. I want to buy it. She laughed, then realized I was serious. Edward, that's a risk. A big one. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I know. But it's time to take back what was mine. She sighed, then said, all right. Let's do it. I hung up, staring at the city skyline, the lights glittering like a challenge. Victor thought he'd broken me. He was wrong. I was just getting started. The day I signed the papers to buy Zenith Solutions, the city felt different. The air was crisp, the skyline sharper, like the world had snapped into focus. I sat in Maya's office, the pen heavy in my hand, and stared at the contract. Zenith, the company that had discarded me, humiliated me, was about to be mine. The price was a fraction of its former value, a steal by any measure, but it wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming what I'd lost, not just the company, but the part of myself Victor had tried to destroy. Maya leaned across her desk, her eyes sharp. You sure about this, Edward? It's a gamble. I nodded, signing my name with a flourish. I'm sure. It's time. The acquisition went through faster than I'd expected. The board, desperate and fractured, didn't put up a fight. They'd seen Apex's rise, read the headlines comparing us to Zenith, and knew I was their best shot at survival. I walked into Zenith's headquarters the next day, the glass doors sliding open like a memory. The lobby smelled the same, polished marble, corporate ambition, but the energy was different, heavy with defeat. Employees glanced up from their desks, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. Some recognized me, their eyes widening, while others whispered, that's Edward Harper, the guy Victor fired. I kept my head high, my steps steady, but inside, my heart pounded. This was my moment, and I wouldn't let it slip. I called a company-wide meeting that afternoon, the auditorium packed with Zenith's remaining staff. They sat in rows, their expressions guarded, and I stood at the podium, the same one Victor had used to fire me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I took a breath, my voice steady. 2 years ago, I stood in this room and was told I didn't belong, I began, my words echoing. Victor Langston fired me, humiliated me, because he saw me as a threat. But I didn't give up. I built Apex Innovations from nothing, and now, I'm here to rebuild Zenith. Not as it was, but as it could be. The room was silent, their eyes locked on me. I'm not here for revenge, I continued, though part of me burned to say otherwise. I'm here for a future. If you're willing to work with me, you'll have a place here. If not, I respect that. But Zenith starts over today. The applause was slow at first, tentative, but it grew, filling the room. I saw faces soften, some nodding, others clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Former colleagues approached me afterward, their voices hesitant. Edward, I'm sorry, one said, a project manager I'd worked with. I should have stood up for you. I shook his hand, my grip firm. We move forward now, I said, and meant it. But not everyone was on board. Some glared from the back, loyalists to Victor, and I knew they'd be trouble. I didn't care. I'd faced worse. Victor's termination was next. I'd planned it carefully, wanting it to be professional, dignified, the opposite of what he'd done to me. I called him into the CEO's office, now mine, and he walked in, his suit rumpled, his face pale. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, but his eyes still burned with that cold fury. "Edward," he said, his voice tight. "You think you've won?" I leaned back in my chair, my hands steady. "I'm not here to win, Victor. I'm here to fix what you broke." I slid the termination papers across the desk, my voice calm. "You're out. Effective immediately. You'll get severance, a chance to leave quietly. Take it." He stared at the papers, his jaw clenched, then looked up, his voice rising. "You think you can erase me? I built Zenith. It's my legacy." I stood, meeting his gaze. "You destroyed your legacy, Victor. When you valued your ego over your people. When you sabotaged Apex. When you fired me for daring to succeed. Zenith's mine now, and I'll make it better than you ever could." He lunged forward, his face inches from mine, and for a moment, I thought he'd hit me. But then he laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You'll fail, Edward. You're nothing without me." I didn't flinch. "Get out," I said, my voice low. He grabbed the papers, stormed to the door, then paused, his parting shot venomous. "You'll regret this." I watched him go, my chest tight, but I didn't waver. He was gone, and Zenith was mine. Rebuilding started immediately. I merged Zenith with Apex, combining our teams, our tech, our vision. It wasn't easy. Zenith's culture was toxic, fractured by Victor's paranoia, and some employees resisted change. I held town halls, listened to their fears, and laid out my plan. Ethical practices, employee wellness programs, community outreach. "We're not just a company," I told them. "We're a force for good." Slowly, they came around. Former skeptics joined Apex's projects, their skills sharpening our edge. The company grew, stronger than ever, and the city took notice. Headlines shifted, Zenith reborn under Edward Harper, one read. "Apex and Zenith, the new tech powerhouse," another declared. I'd stand at my office window, looking out at the skyline, and feel a flicker of pride. We'd done it. I'd done it. But Victor wasn't done. Months later, he showed up at Apex's headquarters, his suit ill-fitting, his face gaunt. "Edward," he said, his voice low. "I need a job." I stared at him, stunned. The man who'd fired me, sabotaged me, now stood before me, broken. Part of me wanted to laugh, to throw his words back at him. "You're nothing without me." But another part, the part I'd fought to nurture, felt a flicker of compassion. "You're asking for help," I said, my tone measured. "After everything." He nodded, his eyes downcast. "I have nowhere else to go." I leaned back, torn between revenge and redemption. "Finally," I said, "I'll give you a chance. A low-level role, under strict conditions. No games, Victor. One misstep and you're out." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "Thank you," he whispered and left. I watched him go, my chest tight. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A chance, maybe, for both of us. That night, I sat in my office, the city lights glittering outside. Apex and Zenith were one now, the largest tech firm in the city, and I was at the helm. I'd reclaimed what Victor had taken, my job, my name, my purpose. But as I looked at the skyline, I realized it wasn't just about winning. It was about building something meaningful, something lasting. I'd fought for this, bled for this, and now it was real. I leaned back, a smile tugging at my lips. I didn't just build a company, I thought. I built a legacy. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. 5 years after I bought Zenith, Apex Innovations wasn't just a company. It was a movement. The headquarters, a sleek tower of glass and steel, stood at the heart of the city, its logo glowing against the skyline. Inside, the floors buzzed with energy, developers coding, teams brainstorming, laughter echoing through the halls. We'd grown beyond anything I'd imagined. A global leader in tech, our AI tools shaping industries from logistics to healthcare. The media called me the Phoenix of Tech, a moniker I found both flattering and heavy. I'd risen from the ashes of Victor's betrayal, but it wasn't just my story. It was ours, Apex's, Zenith's, the team's. And as I stood at my office window, looking out at the city, I felt a quiet pride. We'd done it. Together. The headlines told the tale. Apex and Zenith. The tech powerhouse, one read. Edward Harper's vision redefines innovation, another declared. I'd scroll through articles on my phone, my chest tight, remembering the days when those same outlets had branded me a pariah. Now they wanted interviews, profiles, the works. I'd turn most down, wary of the spotlight, but I couldn't ignore the impact. Clients trusted us, investors called, and our foundation, launched to support aspiring entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds, was changing lives. I'd visit the foundation's workshops, watching young faces light up as they pitched ideas, and feel a flicker of hope. This was the legacy I wanted, not just wealth or power, but possibility. The team had grown, too, their faces a mix of old and new. Malik, now our CTO, led tech with a steady hand, his grin as bright as ever. Jamie, a senior developer, spearheaded marketing, their energy infectious. We'd hired hundreds more, bright-eyed grads and industry vets who'd heard about Apex and wanted in. I'd walk the floors, nodding at familiar faces, and feel a surge of gratitude. They trusted me, fought with me, and now we were stronger than ever. I'd hold town halls, listening to their ideas, their fears, and remind them, we're not just a company. We're a force for good. They'd nod, their eyes meeting mine, and I'd see it, the spark of belief, alive and thriving. But growth brought reflection. I'd sit in my office late at night, the city silent outside, and think about the journey. The betrayal, the lawsuit, the struggle to build Apex. I'd sacrificed so much, late nights, missed family events, relationships frayed by ambition. Jamie had noticed, their brow furrowed one night as they flopped onto my couch. "Ed, you've done it," they'd said. "Why do you look so tired?" I'd sighed, staring at the city lights. "Because it's not enough," I'd admit it. "I need to balance this. Work, life, everything." They'd grinned, slinging an arm around me. "Then do it. You've earned it." Their words had sunk in, and I'd started making changes. Shorter hours, delegating more, trusting more. The team rallied, and I found time for Jamie, for our parents, for myself. That balance led to a celebration I'd never forget. I hosted it at our childhood home, a modest two-story in the suburbs, the kind of place where the walls held memories. Jamie arrived first, their arms full of grocery bags, grinning. "You're cooking, Ed," they said, dumping the bags on the counter. "Mom's orders." I laughed, rolling up my sleeves, and we spent hours in the kitchen, chopping, stirring, laughing. Our parents arrived next, their faces lined but warm, and I hugged them tight, guilt and gratitude warring inside me. "You've done good, Edward," Mom said, her eyes misty. "We're proud." I nodded, my throat tight, and served dinner, a messy, joyful affair, the table crowded with plates and stories. Jamie raised a glass, their voice steady. "To Ed. For building something real." I clinked my glass, my smile wide, and felt whole. This was success, not just Apex, but this. Victor's shadow lingered, though, a faint echo. He'd taken the low-level role I'd offered, working quietly in logistics, his once sharp edges dulled. I'd see him in the halls, his head down, and feel a flicker of something not forgiveness, but understanding. He'd approached me once, his voice low. "I was wrong, Edward," he'd said, his eyes downcast. "About everything." I'd nodded, my tone measured. "I know. But you're here now. Make it count." He'd left, his shoulders slumped, and I'd watched him go, torn between past and present. Later, I found a letter on my desk, his handwriting shaky. "I'm sorry," it began. "I failed you," failed Zenith. "You built something better. Thank you." I read it, then set it aside, my chest tight. It wasn't closure, but it was something. A step, maybe, for both of us. The final moment came at a global tech conference in San Francisco. I stood backstage, my palms sweating, the auditorium packed with thousands. They'd invited me to speak, to share my story, and I'd hesitated, wary of the spotlight. But Jamie had pushed me. "Ed, they need to hear it. You need to tell it." So I did. I walked on stage, the lights blinding, and took a breath. 5 years ago, I was fired. I began, my voice steady. Humiliated, discarded. But I didn't give up. I built Apex Innovations from nothing, and then I rebuilt Zenith. Not for revenge, but for a future. The room was silent, their eyes locked on me, and I told it all. The betrayal, the struggle, the triumph. "Success isn't just wealth or power," I said, my voice rising. "It's building something meaningful, something lasting." And I didn't do it alone. I did it with my team, my family, my belief. I paused, my throat tight. This is for them. For you. For anyone who's been told they don't belong. You do. And you can. The applause was deafening, a roar that shook the room. I stepped back, my chest tight, and saw Jamie in the front row, grinning, clapping. Malik stood beside them, nodding, and I felt it, a surge of purpose. I'd done this, we'd done this, and it mattered. As I left the stage, a young woman approached, her eyes bright. Mr. Harper, your story, it inspired me. I'm starting my own company. Thank you. I shook her hand, my smile wide. Keep going, I said. You've got this. She nodded, and I watched her go, feeling a flicker of hope. The cycle continued, and I was part of it. That night, I stood on the hotel balcony, the city lights glittering below. Apex and Zenith were thriving, my family was close, and I was whole. I'd fought for this, bled for this, and now it was real. I leaned back, a smile tugging at my lips. This is just the beginning, I thought, and meant it. The future stretched ahead, bright and possible, and I was ready for whatever came next. Thanks for listening to this story. Now, it's your turn. What dream will you chase? What legacy will you build? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more inspiring stories. See you in the next story.